All right, today we are reviewing business law test over chapters 7 through 10, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I would recommend and suggest you pull out a piece of paper and take some notes. I will review every single question on the test for you.
Are there essays on this one?
There are no essays.
They're
Okay?
recording you, like recording.
There are a total of 50 questions on this test. 50 questions. A few true and false, and the rest multiple choice. All right. Here's what I would recommend. What?
It's going to be online.
Eventually, this video will not be online before the test, though.
The video will be.
But the audio review is already online. Here's what I would do between now and the test day. I would listen carefully to this review. I would not fade out. I would not go to sleep. I would try my hardest to keep focused for the next 45 minutes on this review. You will do better on the test if you will focus. Then I would probably spend a little time in the textbook between now and the test day, reviewing these 4 chapters and substantially the vocabulary in the chapter. And then I might, if I was a little uncomfortable, I might go to my website, canesworld.org, and I might even listen to the audio review that's already on that website. It's the same material, but it's said a little differently, of course. And the combination of both of those should be powerful for you on your behalf, and you should do very well on the test, okay? Are you ready for the review? So you're taking notes and you're focused. All right, what is a gratuitous agreement? What does a gratuitous agreement mean? Gratuitous agreement means, what's a gratuity? You know what a gratuity is? It's a tip. It is not required. You do not have to tip somebody at a restaurant. You don't have to, technically. But a gratuitous agreement is one where there is no consideration. All right? Is it legally enforceable in court? The answer is no. Are there occasions when they will enforce a gratuitous agreement? The answer is yes. There are some exceptions. The doctrine of promissory estoppel is one. Remember promissory estoppel? Where if I promise to do something for you and you change your life significantly based on my promise, then the court, even though I may not be getting consideration, and it's not an enforceable contract, the court might force me to comply with my promise based on the doctrine of promissory estoppel, to be fair. Okay. Let's see. A child is kidnapped. A reward is offered. A police officer searching through an abandoned building finds the child, returns the child to the parents, and claims the reward. Does the police officer get paid or not? Yeah. Why? It is his duty. He already has the duty to function in that way. Therefore, he has not provided any consideration, and therefore is not entitled to the reward. By the way, are the police officers allowed to accept rewards?
Yes.
The answer is yes, they are. Yeah. If I'm grateful enough that I say I'm going to give you the reward anyway, don't have to, but I'm going to give you the reward. They can take it. All right. What is a detriment? What is a detriment?
Like the loss that you are suffering from the contract.
Yes, it is something you give up. You give up is a detriment, and that is considered consideration. Now, what kind of consideration, what kind of detriment could you experience now? What could you offer? Let's say your parents said, we will give you $1,000 if you don't smoke in the next year. Is that consideration? Are you giving up? If you give up your ability to smoke, have you furnished consideration?
Don't they like not have to pay you for that because you're not supposed to anyway?
Exactly right. Correct.
What are you doing?
Oh, brother. Hello, knuckleheads. Have a seat. No, get away. Move through.
What are you doing?
Another video
Why
down
are
the
you hurting
tubes.
yourself, Weirdo?
All right.
Doing a review.
We're reviewing for the test.
Oh, so am I gonna be on that?
So quiet, have a seat.
Are you gonna show it to your future students?
Not now. All right. So, the truth of the matter is that if something is illegal, then you have furnished no consideration. If I give you $1 million if you don't smoke a joint or smoke marijuana for the next 20 years, that's not consideration because you're not giving up anything you have the legal right to do. That's illegal anyway. You don't have the right to smoke right now, and therefore you're not giving up anything. Okay? So be aware of that. Tell me about the value of consideration. What does the court say about the value? Let's say I'm selling a $1 million painting and I sell it for $25. Is that legal?
Yeah.
It is, because the court says that generally they don't care about the value of consideration, only that consideration has changed hands. $25 is a legally binding contract, okay? Now, there are some exceptions to that too. What could happen that would cause an exception to that? Do you remember? I know it's been a while since these chapters go.
If it was like illegal, like it was stolen.
No, well, no, that's true too, but remember, if somebody's ripped you off, if they've acted unconscionably, then the court might uphold the contract or change the contract even though they don't, the consideration isn't, generally they don't look at consideration. But if somebody has really taken advantage of an old lady or something, and they've acted unconscionably, that means without a conscience, then the court can step in and right the wrong, if you will. Okay? All right. What is infancy?
Under 18? Or
Under the age of
Yes.
consent.
yeah.
Under the age of majority is considered infancy. Minors are, in the eyes of the law, called infants. Okay? Let's see. What if you get good grades last year, got good grades last year, good GPA, and I said, you know what, next week I'm going to give you $100 for your grades last year. Is that legally binding?
No.
What is the doctrine that says it is not binding? What is that called? It's called past consideration. You haven't done anything new for it, so it's considered past, and past consideration doesn't qualify as legally binding. Okay, it has to be something new, it has to be fresh. If I say I'll give you $100 if you get straight A's this term, that's a whole different issue. Because then your effort this term is your consideration. Okay? Advertisements in newspapers. Are they contractually obligating to the people that put the ad in?
Yeah.
Is that an offer?
No.
It is not. What is it called?
It's an advertisement.
Well done. Advertisements are not offers. They are offers to negotiate or invitations to negotiate. That's different. So if there's a misprint in the paper and they're selling the new iPhone S4s, instead of $199, they're on sale for $1.99. They put the period in the wrong place. They are not contractually obligated to give you the phone for $1.99. Okay? Trust me, they won't either. All right. What about a contract between an adult and a minor?
Not valid.
Not legally binding.
Not
because
legally.
The minor doesn't have. What is it?
Let's be careful with this one. A contract between a minor and an adult is voidable by the minor. The minor has the right to void the contract. The adult does not. Make sense? Okay. What's the deal with acceptance? Well, first of all, who can name the 6 elements of all binding contract? 6. What are they? Number 1,
Offer,
offer,
acceptance,
acceptance,
consideration,
genuine agreement, capacity, legality, and consideration. Those are the 6.
You wanna run through those again?
Yeah, one more
What?
time.
Can you go
One
through
more
those
time.
again?
Sure I can. Offer, acceptance, genuine agreement. They have to actually have made, had genuine agreement as to the contract. Capacity, both parties have to have the capacity to enter into the agreement. Legality, the agreement has to be legal. And last but not least, there must be consideration. Both parties must be getting something for the contract, otherwise it's not legally enforceable.
So those
Okay.
are points of contract, what would you call those?
These are the 6 elements of enforceable contracts. Okay, let's see. Tell me about the offer. What does the offer have to look like in order for it to be acceptable? What are the 3 ingredients of all offers? They have to be seriously intended. They have to be definite and certain. And they have to be communicated to the offeree. Okay?
Can you repeat those real quick?
Seriously intended, definite and certain, and they have to be communicated to the offeree. Okay? If you put an ad on KSL, you are offering it to the world. Everybody in the world can accept your offer. But I can make an offer to Michaela, and none of the rest of you have the right to accept that offer. Only Michaela maybe gets that offer. Okay? What about the acceptance? What does the acceptance have to look like? What do we call it? Go.
Doesn't that have to be in the same form that the offer was made?
No, not necessarily. That deals with the timing of when the acceptance takes place. Is about the communication issue. But an offer the acceptance has to be the mirror image of the offer. Has to be accepted 100%. Can't change any of the terms. If you've changed any of the terms, then technically it's not an offer, not an acceptance, it's a counteroffer. Okay? It's the mirror image. That's for non-merchants. Remember, for merchants, that's people in business, there are some slight changes that are allowed even and still have the contract be binding. Remember UCC codes, the Uniform Commercial Code, they do allow certain things to be adjusted inside the contract and the contract is still binding. But for non-merchants, you and me, the acceptance has to be the mirror image of the offer. Okay. Let's see. What if I said, I will sell you my car for $7,000 anytime in the month of November? What is that called? Now, is that a binding contract?
No.
No, you haven't agreed to buy it, but you do have some authority. You'd have the right to buy my car for $7,000 anytime in the next 3 weeks. What do we call that? Anybody know? We call that an option. That's an option. And I can't legally sell my car to anybody else in November because you have the option to buy it. Especially if you've paid some money for the option. We see this in real estate, we see this in stock market, we see this, there are options out there. If you give me $10 and say, I want an option to buy your car for $7,000 in the month of November. And I say, okay, I will hold this car for you, I'm going to keep the $10. Whether or not you buy my car, I'm going to keep the $10 anyway. That's my option price. That's the option premium, they call that. Make sense? That is a legally binding contract. Okay? All right, let's see. If both parties make a promise in a contract, what do we call that kind of contract? Bilateral. A bilateral contract is where both parties make a promise.
You want it to bilateral what?
It's just bilateral, meaning both parties make a promise. If only one party to the contract makes a promise, it's called unilateral. That's correct. What's another word for legally binding? Legally binding. If a contract is legally binding, it is also, we call it, but the better word is valid. It's a valid contract, meaning legally binding. This test is full of vocabulary words. They love vocabulary, okay? What do we call it when the offeror, who is the offeror? Someone who makes the offer, right? The person who accepts the offer is the offeree. But what if the offeror takes back the offer before anybody accepts it? What do we call that legally? What have they done? They've revoked. It's revocation of the offer. They've revoked the offer before anybody accepts. Okay, here's another question about the mirror image rule. You know what that is? Mirror image has to do with the acceptance has to be exactly the same. You can't say, I will buy your skateboard from you, but, if you say a but, then you're starting to change the terms, then it's not mirror image, and then it's not an acceptance. All right. Who does the offer have to be communicated to? The offeree. If I'm selling my house and I put an ad on, I am offering my house to anybody. You are all offerees. Anybody could buy my house. What's a mutual mistake? A mutual mistake. What's another word for mutual mistake?
Both parties have a misunderstanding about the contract.
Exactly. We call that also a bilateral mistake. That can happen. If I'm selling my couch, I think I used the example of a couch. I'm selling my couch to you, and you buy it, you take it home, and it's 3 inches too long. It doesn't fit on the wall that you want to put it up. Is that a bilateral mistake? No, I didn't make a mistake. I sold you the couch. I didn't say it was 94 inches long, and then it turns out to be 97. Now, if I'd say that, then we've made a mutual mistake, and then we can get our money back. Okay? All right. Let's see. What if we have a contract, you and I, and it looks good, but it turns out it's not valid? What do we call that kind of contract? A contract that we thought was valid, but it wasn't for some reason. We call that a defective contract. It's defective. There's something wrong with it. Okay? What do we call it when, well, okay, let's go through some terminology. What's undue influence? Undue influence. Go.
When people, it could be like for people in your family persuade you to accept the contract.
Yeah, when somebody who has some authority or somebody you look up to talks you into doing something that's not in your best interest. We call that undue influence. And it is one of the ways you can get out of a contract is if somebody exercises some undue influence over you. Okay? If your uncle who sells life insurance gets you to buy a big life insurance policy that doesn't make any sense for somebody your age, that's undue influence. Scumbag. All right. What is duress?
If someone made you sign it or something.
Exactly. If someone forces you to sign a contract, there are two types of duress. One is physical duress. That's if I put a gun in your face and make you sign a contract, or I threaten you somehow. That's with physical violence. That's physical duress. The other duress is called economic duress. Economic duress would be what? Give me an example.
They're gonna put you out of business.
Yes. If I threaten to put you out of business for somehow. If you don't carry my product, I will perform economic duress on you. All right, anyway. Threats of business nature, that's called economic duress. Any questions about that? Okay. Let's talk about fraud. Tell me, what are the ingredients of fraud? It's also called what? Larceny by deception or stealing by deception. Fraud, there's a number of ingredients that are required to prove fraud. First of all, it has to be a material fact, meaning it has to be something important about it. If I'm selling a Mustang, we've used this example before, and I'm telling you it's a '64 Mustang, which are very highly prized. That's the year that everybody wants. And I tell you it's a '64 Mustang, and you buy it for $12,000. Turns out it's a '65 Mustang, and because it's a '65, it's only worth $7,000. Well, so you take me to court to get back your money. You overpaid. You want either the $12,000 back and give me back my car, or you certainly want the $5,000 that you overpaid for it, maybe. I don't know, depending on what you're suing for. Well, you have to prove that I actually committed fraud against you. You have to prove, first of all, that it's a material fact. That I said it was a '64 and it's actually a '65, and that hurts the value. You also have to prove that you relied on me. I'm an antique car dealer. I'm supposed to be an expert, and you don't know anything, so you relied on me. If you go in and buy a diamond, you're getting married, and you're buying an engagement ring. Well, you don't know anything about diamonds. You're going to depend on the guy behind the counter to tell you how good quality the diamond is, right? So if you rely on their expertise and they lie to you, then they may have committed fraud. What other kinds of things? You have to have suffered a loss. You can't sue somebody for fraud unless you've actually suffered a loss. You paid $12,000 for the car, it's only worth $7,000.
Don't you have to prove they did it on purpose too?
And you have to prove that they knew it. That's correct. You have to prove that they knew they were lying to you. That's the hardest part of fraud. If I say, well, hey, I bought it from a guy who said it was a '64 and I believed it was a '64, then you're going to have a hard time proving fraud. Okay? Make sense? All right. Let's see. Well, how do you define fraud? Fraud is defined as a deliberate deception to secure an unfair or unlawful gain. A deliberate deception. Okay? Okay, anyway. So let me ask you this question. Can a person get out of a contract because of a bilateral mistake? Yes. Can a person get out of a contract because of a unilateral mistake?
No.
No. Generally speaking, those statements are true. Okay? What do we call it? Let's say I really believed the car was a '64. I really did. But it turns out not to be. I feel bad about it, but I was being honest when I said it was a '64. What am I guilty of? What do we call that? No, not necessarily. I didn't commit fraud because I really believed it was a '64. What I actually did commit was called misrepresentation. I actually misrepresented. And sometimes it's called innocent misrepresentation. And by the way, the person can still get out of the contract, but they can't sue me for extra money. What's it called when you sue somebody for a lot more money than you actually suffered a loss of? It's called punitive damages. Punitive, punishment. When people commit fraud, sometimes they get a big judgment against them, like the cigarette companies and stuff. Once they could prove that the cigarette companies knew that cigarettes caused cancer, that's when people sued for big, big money, punitive damages. Okay, let's see. That's important. There was a question right about that information, about punitive damages. Everybody understand it?
So what's the definition?
Punitive damages are awards of money that are way beyond the actual damage. They are intended to punish the perpetrator of the fraud. Okay? All right, let's see. How old does a person have to be considered an adult?
18.
18.
For their 18th birthday,
Oh, day
right?
before. Yeah.
Technically the day before their 18th birthday, that's right. Is a minor ever considered an adult before that?
You could be tried as an adult.
Okay, that's true. Sometimes when they commit crimes, they can be tried as an adult. That's very interesting and quite controversial, but it's been pretty well accepted over the last 25 years. But what other areas sometimes are you treated like an adult when you're 16 or 17?
Emancipation.
What? Are you young?
Emancipated?
Okay, what if you're not emancipated? Well, if you are emancipated, then you are declared an adult. What if you're not emancipated? Are there other areas
When
that...
you're driving.
Driving is one. Driving, you are always considered an adult when you're behind the wheel of a car. Secondly, there are some times where you can contract as an adult even when you're 16 or 17. For example, if you move away to college and you're not turned 18 yet, and you rent an apartment at college, then you are considered an adult. Remember, if you make contracts for necessaries or necessities of life, if you're on your own at 16 or 17 and making your way in the world, and you have to contract for rent or utilities or something else, that would be considered necessaries, and therefore you are contractually obligated. You can't get out of it. Medical, pharmaceutical products, or for your medical condition. If you're a diabetic and you go away to college and you're buying insulin, that is that's a necessary, and you will be treated like an adult in that way. Okay? Let's see if there's anything else here. How would you define capacity? You should do very well on this test, by the way. You really should. But I
The
would-
ability to, like,
it's the legal ability to enter contracts. That's exactly right. All right. When was the voting age changed to 18? Remember, we did talk about this. Go.
I don't know the year, but I know like around.
When?
It's kind of like
When?
around
Nope. It wasn't World War II. It was around the Vietnam War. If you look at the amendments of the Constitution, that was required an amendment to the Constitution. It was around the Vietnam War. It was 1971.
That's only, that's the year?
Dude, I'm only reviewing the test. I'm not talking about a whole bunch of stuff that's not on the test. You can remember 1971. It was the year I graduated from high school. Very, very good year. All right, anyway. Let's see. Minors, when they enter into contract, sometimes the adult who's entering into the contract requires additional signatures. What are they called?
consent?
What's it called?
Consent?
Nope. Let's say you want to go buy a car. You're 17 years old. You want to finance the car.
Co-signer. Co-signing.
Thank you, Tourette girl. Okay, very good. All right. Co-signers. Co-signers guarantee the loan. By the way, you have to be very careful. I remember helping my daughter buy a car once, and they were insisting that we put the car loan in my name with my Social Security number. I didn't want that because I wanted her to start building credit. I had to literally get up and say, I'm not buying the car, and I started walking out. Then they finally agreed to put the car loan in her name so that she would get credit for it. I didn't need the credit. They really want to hold the co-signers responsible. Okay? So, let's see. You are 19 years old, you want to go into a club. Of course you're not going to drink, but you want to go in the club anyway. So you fake an ID. You buy or alter an ID or something, or you borrow somebody's ID and you use that. Are you guilty of a crime?
Yes.
What are you guilty of? What have you committed?
Fraud.
You have committed fraud. Yeah, you're fraudulent. That's fraudulent behavior. Can you be prosecuted for it?
Yes.
You bet you can. You bet you can.
What's the punishment for?
What?
What usually happens?
Generally nothing happened. I don't know anybody who actually gets prosecuted for it. They have bigger fish to fry than that. Generally, I haven't seen any cases like that. I remember there was a famous case where President Bush's daughters tried to buy beer and they were underage. They didn't get in any trouble. The Secret Service people did because they allowed them to do it. Anyway, they got fired. Well, transferred actually, supposedly. Let's see. So, when do people become an adult? When do they reach the age of majority?
When they're 8.
All right. Okay. Well, that's a little beyond this question. All right, let's see. Can mentally handicapped individuals, mentally impaired people, enter into contracts?
No.
Wait, be careful.
Well, they
Hang on,
can,
they're
but they
voidable.
voidable.
All right, here's the way this works. This is important.
Let's go with that.
Mentally handicapped. What did you say?
Unless you give him an apple. You're just a jerk.
I am so misunderstood. Okay, anyway.
That was just me.
Mentally handicapped people are, generally speaking, their contracts are voidable by them. They can get out of their contracts. If they have been declared incompetent by a court and they've been appointed a guardian to take care of them, like the Apple Boy, then their contracts are void. They cannot enter into a contract to begin with.
Hang on, if they're what? If they're, what'd you say?
If they have been declared incompetent in a court,
Okay.
and there is a guardian appointed to them to take care of them, then they don't have the capacity to enter into a contract, okay? Let's see. So it goes from voidable to void
With the guardian.
with the guardian deal, yeah. Let's say you enter into a contract when you're 17 to buy my skateboard for $20, and you're going to pay me $1 a month. And so for the next 20 months, you're paying me $1. But after 10 months of paying me $1, you turn 18 years old. And then you continue to make payments. How is that? What's the deal with that contract? Is that contract still voidable by you?
No,
Why?
because you're in the.
Now that you've turned 18, what have you done? What's the word I'm looking for? There's a special word for that. You have ratified the contract. Once you've turned 18 years old and you have indicated that you're going to continue with the contract by making another payment, you've ratified that as an adult.
So
And if-
like, if I just turn 18 and I stop making payments, that's okay? Or did we just stop?
Well, okay, not okay.
Not morally, just like.
If you,
Legally.
in order to get out of a contract, you have to tender returning the item. You can't just stop making payments and then hide from them. If you are not going to, if you want to return the car, you can get out of the purchase. It's voidable, but you can void the contract by returning the car and saying, I'm not paying you any more money. But you can't do that after you've made a payment after you've turned 18.
Chase me down for my $1?
That's correct.
Okay.
Let's see. Tell me what the difference is between a juvenile delinquent and an unruly child.
Delinquent's like been committed like a serious crime.
What?
Delinquent like committed a crime and like unruly is just like random.
Yes, remember, delinquent child, yeah, there are some in here, are people that have committed a crime. If you commit a crime that nobody is allowed to do, then you are a delinquent. If you rob a bank, if you steal something, if you hurt somebody, assault and battery, if you're breaking and entering, kidnapping, whatever you do. If you do something stupid, that's a delinquent. An unruly child is someone who does something that if they were an adult they could do, like drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes. That technically is not delinquency. That's considered being an unruly child because you are doing something that currently at this moment is not legal for you to do. Okay? If you smoke dope, that's delinquency because nobody has the right to smoke dope unless you have a medical condition of some sort. Okay. I know you do. You have lots of medical conditions. Marijuana will not help. Let's see. So, what do we call it when a minor cancels a contract? What's the word for it? What? Disaffirm is exactly right. They are disaffirming the contract. If they are disaffirming a contract, they are required, if they still have possession of the item, to offer it to return. That's important. Let's see, giving up the right to something that you have the right to have is called what? If you give up the right to something you have the legal right to keep, what is that called? A detriment. That's exactly right. Remember, contracts offer benefits and detriments. The reason you enter into a contract is to get a benefit. What you give up for that contract is a detriment. Okay? Let's see. So when there is no consideration in a contract, we call that what kind of contract? gratuitous. Yeah, that's a contract with, that's a gift, there's another word for it. Gifts are gratuities. They are not legally obligated to give you a gift. Once I give you a gift, though, can I ask for it back? Technically, no. No. Yeah. So, let's see. Give me an example of a contract that is enforceable even though there is no consideration. Do you remember a couple of exceptions at the end of that chapter? Yeah. Gifts to charity. Remember, we talked about subscriptions and pledges to telethon, watching TV late at night, and our heart goes out to those poor suffering animals or something, and we call them up and pledge $10,000. Then the next morning we wake up and say, what have we done? And you just ignore it. Don't send them the check. Well, you are legally obligated, even though you can say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not getting anything in return. There's no consideration. This is a special category. So gifts to charity are your good feel. What they say is your good feelings having contributed is your consideration. Yeah, great. Anyway, all right, let's see what else there is. What's the doctrine that sometimes forces people to comply with their promise even though there is no consideration? The doctrine of promissory estoppel. Remember the girl that went to college because her uncle offered to pay for it after she graduated? So she borrowed a bunch of money, went to college, and then he changed his mind? Yeah. Thanks, uncle. Well, the court could force him to pay based on the doctrine of promissory estoppel. You made a promise. I'm going to stop you from treating this person so unfairly. Remember, judges are trying to be just, trying to right wrongs and be fair to people. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, here's an interesting question. Remember, courts don't normally look at how much consideration is happening. I could sell a Mercedes for $5 if I want to. And that's legally binding. I can't change my mind after you've bought it and driven it home. I can't say, hey, wait a minute, I got ripped off. I want my car back. No, too bad. I'm supposed to be an adult, right? But what might a court look at? When might a court, let me put it this way, when might a court look at how much consideration was paid? Under what condition would that become a big deal, maybe? That's a tricky question because it requires you to extrapolate out a little bit. In the event that you're being sued for fraud, in a fraud case, the adequacy of consideration is a big deal. Does this make sense? How much you paid comes into play a lot, because it can prove whether or not there was fraudulent behavior taking place. If I'm selling a bed and I said George Washington slept in this bed and I'm selling it as an antique for $200,000. Then you take it home, you get underneath and it says made in China, 2005. You got ripped. Okay, my daughter just bought a painting. She commissioned a painting, believe it or not. She had this photograph of a horse. Somehow, I don't know where she found this guy, but she found somebody in China. She sent the picture to somebody in China, and the Chinese guy painted an oil painting of this horse. And it's remarkably good. I mean, it's a big painting now of this horse that, I don't know why she wanted it, but he took the painting and he painted this horse.
Were the legs on it?
Legs and everything. Legs were complete with legs. Anyway, believe it or not, it was a big oil painting. She paid this guy $80. And this guy specializes in copying pictures. Pretty interesting. I had not heard of that before. But realize that how much she paid him could, if there was a fraud case. Let's say I was buying a Vincent van Gogh painting, and it turns out that some Chinese guy copied it. Because it was pretty well done, pretty interesting. $80. I thought I was surprised. Anyway, so be aware that when generally they don't look at consideration, it's not part of the deal, unless I'm suing you for fraud. Then the judge said, well, how much did you pay? I paid $25,000 for this thing. And it's not worth it because he lied to me about it or whatever. Then the judge might look at, this is called adequacy of consideration. And it does play into fraud cases. Okay, almost done. If I give you something with no consideration coming back to me, what is it called? A gift. Okay? This gets complicated. When will a court, well, let's say you come over to my house. Let's say I don't know. Let's see what happens. Let's say you come to my house and you give me this presentation. Well, that's not going to be a good example either. Well, okay. I'm trying hard not to read the question to you here, but I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Tell me again about unconscionable. What does that mean? Without a conscience. There are some slick salespeople out there who can sell things to people who don't really need them. And you know, if you talk grandma into buying a huge insurance policy and now she's eating cat food because she's making payments on this and she can't afford to feed herself, then that person is unconscionable and the judge can change it. I mean, even though your grandma is a mature adult, in that case, consideration becomes a big issue. All right. What is illusionary? What's an illusionary contract?
When it seems like it is, but it isn't.
When what?
When it seems like it's.
Yeah, that's right, when it's not real. When it looks like a contract, but it really doesn't. It doesn't have the ingredients of a contract. It sounds like it. If I say, hey, if I buy apples, I'm going to buy them from you. That's an illusionary contract. I didn't make any promise. Right?
How's that different than the defective contract?
Well, an illusionary contract is defective. Defective is a bigger category. All contracts that don't meet the 6 criteria of enforceability are defective. An illusionary contract is one type of defective contract. Does that work for you? I just made that up. It sounds good, though. I believe that. Let's see. What's another word for detriment? When you sacrifice or give up something you have the right to do, what's another word for that? That's a detriment. But what's the word they use legally? Anybody remember? The word is forbearance. You are forbearing. You are not going to do something that you have the legal right to do. Forbearance. Let's see if there's anything else here. How would you define consideration? Consideration is defined as the exchange of benefits and detriments is consideration. And that, my young friends, is the entire review for the test. I have reviewed every single question. Any questions?
What was the definition of it? Consideration?
Consideration is the exchange of benefits and detriments. Okay.